Hey everyone, Alexander James Guitars here. How's it going? This is going to be a Fix It Friday on this 1981 Gibson Les Paul Silverburst, and we're gonna do a full refret on it. So this guitar's frets are pretty low and the customer wants them higher. They've worn down through time, and also he's noticing a little bit of buzz here and there on the fretboard. So if you notice, and I'll bring you in for a closer look, on most Gibson Les Paul Customs like this, you can see that there's these binding nubs. Now these frets were pretty low to begin with from the factory, and I guess, you know, comparatively to nowadays guitars, they use much higher frets. Now there's not a lot of meat on these binding nubs to actually put new frets in and then transition them perfectly. So when I get these frets out, I'm gonna actually have to take down every single one of these binding nubs. Now you could reestablish these by making some binding butter, so some old binding and some acetone melted, put a nub right on every single fret and then shape it. But that makes the fret job so much more labor intensive and so much more expensive. I don't know if this is gonna show up on video, but I just wanna show you something pretty cool. On top of the black here, there's actually some gold specks, and so I think this guitar actually got hit with some overspray at Gibson back in the day. Maybe they were spraying a gold top or like one of those gold burst style guitars at the same time that this one was in the booth. Just showing you, this guitar is in pretty good condition. When you're taking the strings off one of these Gibson guitars like this, make sure that you pull the actual stop tail and the bridge right off. You can set the action if it gets messed up later, but you don't want those pieces falling onto the top and damaging the top. I want to take out this fret first, measure it all, check it out, make sure I have fret wire that's going to match these frets in the fret tang. So I'm going to tape off parts of the guitar to protect it, because I'm going to use that soldering iron technique. I've showed you that before in my other Fix It Friday videos of doing refrets and taking frets out. And this is just good procedure to protect the guitar, you know, from if you ever slipped or anything like that. And double up the tape. And because I'm using the soldering iron on this fret, I want to put a piece of tape butt up against this fret just in case you slid off and hit the fretboard. You don't want to burn the fretboard. These are going to be quite difficult to get out because they're so low. There's not a lot of meat to grab on. And when you feel it just release, there we go. So I want to show you how much fret was left. There's one of the frets out of the Silverburst. And here is a new fret. So you can see how much more crown height there is on these new frets. So these definitely needed to be replaced. So now it's time to do this a million more times, so I'll spare you the pain. If you do want to torture yourself watching me take out 21 frets, because we already did one, there's other videos on my YouTube channel, and you can check it out and see how I go about doing it this way. So I'm just continuing on taking the frets out of this guitar, and I'm not sure what glue they used in 1981, but this is almost like epoxy. Heating up the frets almost does nothing. The glue is so strong, it just holds in every single one of these frets. But what I'm noticing, aside from the typical ebony chipping here that will have to be repaired when this board gets re-leveled, I don't know if you can see this, but a huge chunk has come out right here. Now, it's not just because it's a normal chip when taking the frets out. There's actually a super long crack in the fretboard here. And I didn't notice it before. I only noticed it when that piece lifted. It could very well be from, you know, humidity or temperature changes over the years and the ebony shrinking. But that crack actually also starts up at the nut. And so this is going to have to be fixed. And that this fretboard is going to have to be restabilized with that crack being there. So just take a look here. Right there you can see the hairline crack that goes from the nut to roughly the 11th fret. It's got to be filled, well, clean and then filled. And then also check out these frets that were in this Silverburst Les Paul. See that glue? It's so weird. Do any of you guys know what glue they used in the 80s? You know, leave it in the comments below. Okay, so now that the frets are finally out of this guitar, it literally took me forever. The glue on these were just ridiculous. And now there's some ebony chip out that we have to go in and fill. That crack that, like I said, starts at the nut here. I'll try and get a close-up of that so you can see. We have to fix that crack that goes from here to here. And also, there's so much glue. I can't even run my fingernail through these slots. There's so much glue in there. I have to also go in there and clean out every single one of these fret slots. So this crack here, I want to put some super glue in and stabilize it. I've butted up some green tape against the nut here so that I don't have to fight with getting the glue off of the nut. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to go along each one of the frets here, and any type of, you know, lifted grain or small chip, I'm going to fill with super glue, and in this case, because it's an ebony fretboard, some ebony dust. It'll look bad now because there'll be all these glue lines, but I'm sanding this fretboard down a little bit to re-level it, so you'll never know it was even done, and it'll look great. Just use a razor blade to push that glue into the split. And again, don't worry about this because we're going to be taking this all off when we level this board. And then, like I said, we're going to just stabilize each side. I'll do one side at a time of the fret slots here, just to stabilize any loose grain that's come up. If there's a major chip, you want to fill it with super glue and epoxy, but try not to get the super glue in the slot. Just run a thin bead, and when that dries, I'll do the other side. All the glue is dried on the fretboard, but I need to go in and I need to clean out every one of these fret slots because there's so much glue in there left over from Gibson. So I'm going to take this little saw that's actually a thinner kerf than the actual fret slot kerf, and I'm going to use this to go in and saw out all the dried glue that's left in the slot. So with a process like this, it always has to look worse before it'll look better. So right here, all this glue is going to be drying. I'll sand this back and then clean out every single one of the fret slots on the inside because all of that leftover Gibson glue. And this will look pretty much like it was never touched. Then we'll put the new frets in. Okay, so now that I have every one of the fret slots cleaned out with that little double-sided saw, I want to go and just roughly take down every single one of these glue lines. You don't have to be super accurate, as long as you just get them as close to flush with the fretboard as possible, because we'll be using a radius block to reestablish this anyways. So I'm just going to use a precision beam like this with some stick-it sandpaper on it and start going at the fretboard here. Wow guys, this fretboard is way more messed up than I thought it was to begin with. Gibson traditionally likes to razor blade between the frets when the frets are in. And obviously that has created a whole bunch of dips and valleys in the fretboard here, as well as just, I think over time there's some play wear, but also just some really low spots. So I went a little further with the sanding beam than I normally would, because it's just going to save me time, because now when I go over it with the 12-inch radius beam, it's going to be a lot easier to reestablish this. But this fretboard is just like a valley. There's just ups and downs all through it. So at this point also what I want to do is I want to go through and I just want to, you know, it's not directly down to the fretboard yet, but any type of little small chip from taking the frets out, I want to fill those and then continue with the 12-inch radius on this. It's a little hard to get this shot, but I'm going to try and show you what I'm doing with the radius beam. I've set the neck completely straight with a precision straight edge, and I'm going to be lightly going back and forth with the radius beam. Now you want to keep it as straight as possible along the fretboard. So now I have the fretboard radiused and all leveled, but the thing is, with a guitar of this age, sometimes there's some plane wear that you simply just can't get out. The reason being is you don't want to take down the fretboard so much that, you know, you start to hit the side dot inlays or something like that, or even bottom out the actual pearl inlays on the top. So stuff like this that you're seeing, this right here is play wear, where the player's fingers have actually dug away some of the ebony. And so this unfortunately has to stay in there, because I don't want to take it down to get that out. That'd be taking off a lot of fretboard. So as you can see in this area, a lot of this has turned out really nice. And so this is pretty much ready now to have the frets installed. Now I want to prep this fretboard for accepting frets. Before I press the frets in, I want to put a little chamfer on each side of the fret slot here. That'll stop the fretboard from chipping out if the frets ever need to be taken out again. So I'm just taking a triangle needle file here. I'm going to put the tip portion into the slot, and just very carefully, because this is now finished and you don't want to scratch up the fretboard, I just want to roughly just file the edges of the slot. You don't want to take out a whole bunch. There, that's all. And I'll do this to every fret slot. after nipping off the fret tang on the ends of the fret, there's just this little residual tang here that I need to take off with any type of small file, just so that the bottom of this fret will sit flush on the edges of the fretboard. So I want to put a fret in this slot. I already did a test one and it worked perfectly fine. What I want to do is I want to make sure that the tang part seats in the middle. And I'm going to put a dab of super glue on the ends and in the middle. Not much, just a little bit. And then I'll hammer it in. Any type of glue that comes out, we'll clean that up later when it's dried with a razor blade. Obviously very careful because we don't want to mar what work we've done to the top of the fretboard here. But basically those two frets are in, and now I'll continue on down. For that fret there, I did it off of the work table just to get a good angle and just to show you, you know, you don't have to really nail on these too hard to get them in. Unfortunately, with a neck that's already in the body like this, unless you have one of the clamping call plier style fret pushers, you have to hammer them in. Just be really careful because especially with this old nitro lacquer finish, you don't want anything hard on the finish because it's super easy to crack it. So you want to make sure that you're well supported, and sometimes it literally doesn't take much to get a fret in. Just holding the neck, something like this, and then light taps along the length of the fret. All the frets are in, and now the super glue needs to dry. Any type of glue squeeze out you can see, doesn't matter now. We'll clean that up, like I said, with a razor blade. Take that all off there and make it look really nice. You just want to make sure that each one of the frets are seated nicely. And these are. I check every single time I do a fret. And so I'm just going to let this dry. Then I'll come in and nip the ends. Clean them all up. And then start filing the edges. And then do any fret work that needs to be done. Time to get this neck as straight as possible. All the tape's on to protect the fretboard. Just gonna place this precision straight edge right in the middle. And then I'm just gonna look and see what truss rod adjustment needs to be done to get this neck straight. So close. So close. Just a slight bow. Tad more. Now let the fretboard straight, get out that black marker and just run some ink on the top of every single one of the frets. I want to take the long leveling beam and do a couple strokes with it and see where there's high and low spots. Then you may need to go in with the smaller one get those averaged out, and then go back to the long one. I'm barely going to press down any weight. I don't want to change the shape of the neck. It's hard to accurately film this, but you saw me just take a couple strokes on the fretboard, and you can see right here where there's no black marker left, but then on this one there's some spots where it is left. So that's what we're trying to do. There's some black marker down here. Let's try and focus that. And then also it's not hitting here, but on this fret it is hitting. So you just want to go really lightly and try and get those all so that there's no black marker left just right in the middle of the fret. From leveling the frets, I have a scratch pattern going this way. I want to get that scratch pattern out by crowning the fret with a crowning file. So all of these scratch patterns going this way, the second they're gone, when using the crowning file, you're done. You got to leave that fret. So here's one that's been done. So now all the scratch pattern would technically be going this way. There's none left going this way, so this fret's done. So we have to do that to this fret. And you have to do this in very specific light because it's hard to see the scratch pattern going this way and noticing when it's only going in the forward direction. It's really hard with the camera in your face too. So I'm finally finished the full refret on this super cool 1981 Les Paul Silverburst. I'm going to be just doing some tests with it through this custom made amp that I made a while ago. So let's check that out. How does it go? Yeah. It's been so long since I've played Tool.